If you want to understand the sheer velocity of global commerce, you have to look at India, a market of over 1 billion consumers, operating in an environment where hyper-modernity collides with deeply traditional commerce every single second. But tracking economic mobility at this scale requires a massive, standardized dataset to accurately audit the consumer landscape. That definitive audit is the Indian Readership Survey, specifically the Q4 release from 2019. Market strategists rely on this survey because it indexes the population using the new Consumer Classification System, or NCCS. This is the primary metric used to categorize the socioeconomic status of Indian households. The system separates the population into distinct tiers. The middle and upper economic classes fall into NCCS categories A, B, and C, while the lower socioeconomic groups are designated as D and E. This demographic chart shows the baseline reality in 2014. The majority of the country's population was concentrated heavily in the lowest brackets, anchoring the bottom half of the consumer economy. Then the 2019 Q4 survey data was published, delivering a statistical shock to market expectations. In a span of just 5 years, the lower DE tier collapsed to 31%, and the upper ABC categories swelled to capture 69% of the total population. This translates into tens of millions of households, experiencing rapid, compressed upward mobility in roughly 60 months. A demographic shift of this magnitude suggests the rate of acquisition has accelerated beyond traditional projections. It requires an explanation beyond a simple reclassification error. This massive demographic inversion is the mathematical output of a rapid sequential layering of physical infrastructure and consumer assets. To understand how it happened, we have to rebuild the model of the equipped consumer from the ground up. You cannot analyze modern consumer and media behavior without first examining the physical environment of the household. We need a first principles buildup. Economic mobility is built in layers. We will use this asset stack to deconstruct the shift, starting entirely with infrastructure. The most fundamental metric of modernization is power, specifically securing reliable grid connections for rural districts. This graph indicates that between 2017 and 2019, rural electrification jumped from roughly 90% to over 96%. While electricity provides literal power, another baseline asset provides something equally critical: time. Across rural India, households began adopting liquid petroleum gas stoves at an aggressive rate. In just a 2-year window, rural gas stove ownership surged from under 55% to over 77%. Removing the daily necessity of foraging for firewood and tending open fires returns hours of manual labor back to the household, primarily affecting women. That reclaimed time translates directly into the capacity to engage in the wider economy and consume media. By solving for power and time, this infrastructural bedrock gave the lowest socioeconomic tiers the footing required to begin their climb into the ABC categories. Once basic survival logistics are handled, consumer spending immediately reroutes toward utility and mobility. This triggers the next logical step in household evolution: the acquisition of durable goods. With reliable electricity flowing into these homes, we see a compounding nationwide increase in major appliance ownership. This line chart tracks all India refrigerator ownership, scaling from 22% in 2014 to 34% by 2019. Refrigeration is a specific indicator of economic stability. It reduces food waste and alters the frequency and volume of household shopping trips. While appliances optimize the inside of the home, consumers were also spending heavily to secure external economic mobility. Nationwide two-wheeler ownership grew significantly over the 5-year survey period, jumping from 24% to 43%. But the national averages hide the true engine of this growth. Urban adoption remained relatively stable, hovering around a high existing baseline. The primary driver was rural acquisition, with rural two-wheeler ownership surging from 29% to 39% in just the final 2 years of the survey. The aggressive accumulation of these vehicles and appliances transitioned these families into the NCCS ABC categories, marking a clear departure from subsistence living. Physical durables and a steady power supply serve as the mandatory hardware platforms. They set the stage for the final phase of consumer evolution: connectivity. This brings us to the highest tier of our consumer model. The primary digital gateway for this population is the smartphone, and its penetration across the country has been immense. Because physical logistics were secured at the infrastructure layer, platform adoption could scale exponentially, untethered by physical limits. This chart highlights rural social media access, which more than doubled from 10% to 25% in just 24 months. When you map this digital access against the socioeconomic data, the growth in connectivity mirrors the massive expansion of the ABC demographic we saw earlier. That rapid acceleration leads directly to the most significant media consumption finding in the entire 2019 report. Looking at absolute internet user volume, the geographic dominance flipped. The data confirms there are now more total internet users in rural India than in urban India, based on a one-month lookback. The rural consumer has bypassed the drawn-out technology adoption curves of many Western markets, moving directly into a high-frequency digital reality. The final consideration is how this digitized, equipped demographic actually consumes media. The survey's executive summary validates our model, noting a rapidly evolving media landscape driven by this improved NCCS profile. A common fallacy in market strategy assumes that a surge in digital connectivity automatically cannibalizes traditional broadcast platforms. The data proves otherwise. Despite the explosion of smartphones and internet access, both television viewing and radio listenership demonstrated continued growth, even on an extremely large base. This resilience in broadcast media stands in sharp contrast to the downward trend in newspaper and print readership across all demographics. When we zoom out and view this complete model, the demographic mystery of 2019 resolves itself. That 69% block sitting in the ABC tier is the representative output of this model, a population of electrified, motorized, and digitally connected households. Market penetration models can no longer treat rural India as a dark, disconnected frontier. The baseline has shifted toward an informed, high-velocity, multi-screen environment. Strategies must now be built for that reality.